December 18, 1944. Somewhere in the Philippine Sea, a wall of water 60 feet tall is moving at 150 miles per hour. Inside that wall, 3 United States destroyers are already gone, swallowed whole. 790 American sailors are about to die, not from Japanese torpedoes, not from any aircraft. From weather, Typhoon Cobra has just made direct contact with the United States Third Fleet, and Admiral William Halsey made a decision that morning that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He sailed directly into it. 80 years later, the United States Navy operates carriers that dwarf anything Halsey commanded. $13 billion of steel, nuclear power, 5,000 souls, and the storms are still out there. So, what actually happens when a Category 5 typhoon finds a United States aircraft carrier in the open ocean? The answer will change how you see these ships forever. The United States Navy has sailed through more than 200 years of storms. It has lost ships to hurricanes in the Atlantic, typhoons in the Pacific, and nor'easters off the coast of New England. But the modern Nimitz and Gerald R. Ford-class carriers, these are not the wooden ships of the 19th century. These are not even the steel destroyers that Typhoon Cobra consumed in 1944. These are floating cities, nuclear-powered, capable of generating their own electricity, their own fresh water, their own food supply independently for months at a time. The question isn't whether a United States carrier can survive a Category 5 storm. The question is how, and what it costs the 5,000 people living inside it, when nature decides to fight back. Today, we go inside that story. The engineering, the decision-making, the physics, and the human reality of riding out the most powerful storms on Earth inside 1,092 feet of steel. If you're proud of the American sailors who face dangers most of us will never understand, type P-ROD in the comments right now. Let them know this nation hasn't forgotten what they do, every single day, the storm that changed everything. To understand how modern carriers survive typhoons, you first need to understand what happened on December 18, 1944. Typhoon Cobra, also known as Halsey's Typhoon, was a Category 5 storm with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour and waves reaching 70 feet. That's the height of a 7-story building, moving toward you every few seconds. Admiral Bull Halsey commanded the most powerful naval force ever assembled at that point in history. Hundreds of ships, thousands of aircraft. And on that morning, his weather forecasting equipment, primitive by today's standards, gave him conflicting information about exactly where the storm would go. He chose wrong. Within hours, 3 destroyers, the USS Hull, the USS Monaghan, and the USS Spence, rolled past the point of no return and capsized. A destroyer rolls uncontrollably at around 70 degrees. These ships hit 80. Some sailors reported seeing 110 degrees before the ocean took them. 790 men died, not in battle, in a storm. 9 carriers were damaged. More than 150 aircraft tied down on flight decks were either destroyed or washed overboard. Here's what nobody tells you about that day. The carriers survived even then in 1944. With far less technology and far less engineering, the carriers survived. Because size matters in a storm, in ways most people never consider. A 27,000-ton destroyer rides the surface of the ocean. Every wave tosses it, every trough drops it. It is, in the language of naval engineers, a surface reactive vessel. A 100,000-ton aircraft carrier does something different. It doesn't ride the waves. It moves through them, the physics of 100,000 tons. Here is something that will change how you think about these ships forever. When a Category 5 typhoon generates a wave 60 feet tall and 1,200 feet long, that wave is moving through the ocean at approximately 60 miles per hour. A Nimitz-class carrier is teed out 92 feet long. Do you see what that means? The carrier is almost exactly as long as the wave itself, which means at any given moment, the bow of the ship is rising on one wave, while the stern is descending into the trough behind it. The ship doesn't pitch forward and back the way a smaller vessel does, it flexes. Naval engineers call this phenomenon hull slamming, and the Gerald R. Ford-class carriers are specifically designed to handle it. The hull of the Ford-class carrier is constructed from high-tensile steel plating up to 4 inches thick in critical sections. The internal frame is divided into more than 2,000 watertight compartments. Even if 20% of those compartments flood simultaneously, which would require catastrophic unprecedented hull damage, the ship remains afloat. Think about that for a moment. You could punch 400 holes in a United States aircraft carrier and it would still float. But flooding is not the primary threat in a typhoon. The primary threat is momentum. A 100,000-ton ship traveling at 34 miles per hour carries kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear device. In a storm, that energy must be managed, redirected, or it becomes the weapon that destroys you. This is where the carrier's nuclear propulsion system becomes the most important survival tool on the ship. The nuclear advantage. Most people think of nuclear power as a fuel source. On a United States aircraft carrier in a Category 5 storm, it is a survival mechanism. Here's why. A conventional oil-powered warship in a major storm faces a terrifying dilemma. The storm consumes fuel at a rate far beyond normal operations, running the engines at high power to maintain steerage, to keep the bow pointed into the waves, burns through reserves at 3 to 4 times the normal rate. Run long enough, and you run out of fuel. A ship without power in a typhoon is not a ship anymore, it's wreckage waiting to happen. A nuclear carrier has no such limitation. The 2 nuclear reactors aboard a Nimitz-class carrier contain enough enriched uranium to operate at full power for 20 years without refueling. A Category 5 typhoon, even the longest and most powerful, lasts days, not years. The carrier can run its engines at maximum output for the entire duration of the storm and never once worry about fuel. But here's what most people don't realize about carrier storm tactics. You don't always run away from a typhoon. Sometimes, you run toward a specific part of it. Every tropical storm has what meteorologists call a navigable semicircle, the half of the storm where the winds and waves, while still extreme, are moving in a direction that allows a large vessel to make forward progress. Enter the wrong semicircle, and the storm's rotation pushes you deeper in, slows you down, and pins you against the worst of the weather. Enter the navigable semicircle correctly, and the carrier can use the storm's own energy to accelerate away from the eye, using the wind as a weapon rather than a threat. Admiral Halsey didn't know this in 1944. Every United States carrier captain knows it today. Before we continue, if this video has given you a new perspective on what our Navy is capable of, please take 1 second to hit that like button and subscribe to American Steel. Over 98% of people watching right now haven't subscribed. It costs nothing, but it helps us keep telling these stories about the men and women who protect this nation. Hit subscribe. We'll be right back. Inside the ship, during a Category 5. Now let's talk about the 5,000 people living inside this steel fortress when the storm hits. Because the physics and the engineering are impressive, but the human reality is something else entirely. When a carrier enters severe weather, the captain issues what's called a heavy weather bill. Every loose item on the ship, aircraft, vehicles, equipment, furniture, is secured with chains, straps, and tie-downs rated to hold against forces 3 times the expected storm load. The 70 to 80 aircraft on the flight deck are chained to the deck with tie-down chains capable of holding 45,000 pounds each. There are up to 20 chains per aircraft. If you do that math, that's 900,000 pounds of restraining force holding down a single FA-8 Super Hornet that weighs 47,000 pounds fully loaded. They do not take chances. Below deck, the story is different. A 100,000-ton ship in 50-foot seas still rolls. Not like a destroyer, not 70 or 80 degrees. But 10 to 15 degrees of roll on a vessel 250 feet wide is enough to send unsecured objects and unsecured people sliding across the floor. Sailors report walking the passageways during heavy weather by bracing both hands against the walls. Eating in the mess becomes an exercise in physics. Trays slide, liquids spill, and the simple act of sitting in a chair requires constant muscular effort. Sleep is almost impossible. Not because of noise, the ship's hull dampens most of the external roar of the storm, but because of the constant, unpredictable rolling. Your body never fully relaxes. Your inner ear never stops sending alarm signals to your brain. Experienced sailors call it storm fatigue. After 48 hours in heavy seas, cognitive performance degrades. Reaction time slow. Decision-making becomes impaired. And yet, the ship must still be operated. Aircraft must still be accounted for. Damage control teams must still be on watch. The captain must still be sharp. This is what most people never see in the photographs of carriers cutting through storms. The human cost of keeping that ship alive. The modern advantage technology Halsey never had. In 1944, Admiral Halsey had a barometer, a radio, and the judgment of his meteorological officer. Today, a United States carrier strike group carries technology that would have seemed like science fiction to every admiral who ever lived before 1990. The ANSPY-6 radar system, installed on the latest Ford-class carriers, can track weather systems with a resolution of less than 100 meters at distances exceeding 500 miles. It doesn't just tell the captain where the storm is. It tells him where every cell within the storm is moving, at what speed, and what the wave height will be at any given coordinate in the next 72 hours. The carrier's meteorological team, a dedicated unit of Navy weather specialists, runs continuous atmospheric models updated every 15 minutes. They feed data to the captain in real time. And if the situation becomes genuinely catastrophic, if a storm intensifies faster than any model predicted, and the carrier cannot maneuver away, the ship has one final option that no other vessel on Earth possesses: full nuclear power emergency sprint. A Nimitz-class carrier at full nuclear power can sustain speeds exceeding 34 knots, roughly 39 miles per hour. Most Category 5 typhoons in the Pacific move at 10 to 20 miles per hour. The carrier is almost always faster than the storm. Almost always. What it means to be out there. Right now, as you watch this video, there are United States aircraft carriers at sea. Not in port, not in training exercises off the coast of California. At sea, in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, in the Persian Gulf. And the ocean does not care that they are there. It does not make exceptions for nuclear reactors, or high-tensile steel, or 80 years of engineering advancement. The storms come. They always come. And the men and women aboard those ships, average age 19 years old, face them. Not because they were ordered to be at sea when the storm arrived. Not because they had no choice. Because they signed up knowing the ocean is indifferent, knowing that some deployments end in ways no one talks about at homecoming ceremonies. They went anyway. The next time you see a photograph of a United States aircraft carrier, that 1,092-foot city of steel cutting through a gray and violent sea, remember what it took to build it. The 40,000 workers, the $13 billion, the 20 years of engineering refinement since the last class. And then, remember what it cost to crew it. 5,000 people, away from their families, sleeping in spaces smaller than a prison cell, eating from trays that slide across tables in 50-foot seas, running on 4 hours of sleep because the storm doesn't stop. And neither do they. This is what American strength looks like. Not in a speech, not in a parade. Out there, in the dark, in the storm, where it has always been. Typhoon Cobra took 790 American lives in 1944. It also taught the United States Navy everything it needed to know about building ships that storms cannot kill. 80 years later, the lessons are built into every weld, every watertight door, every chain holding a $70 million aircraft to the deck of a ship that refuses to sink. The ocean is still out there. The storms are still coming. And so is the United States Navy. Now you know why. If this video changed how you see these ships, hit that like button and subscribe to American Steel. Our next video goes somewhere most people have never seen. Inside the classified medical bay aboard a United States carrier, where Navy surgeons perform open-heart surgery with no hospital for 1,000 miles in any direction. You won't want to miss it.